Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining United Way of Southwest Alabama and the South Alabama Coalition of Nonprofits for our monthly DEI training. This training is our September training, and we are focusing on mental health. I am Trista Stout-Walker, VP of Community Impact at United Way, and we are very thrilled that one of our DEI committee members, Diane McCaskey, had a wonderful neighbor over at Central Presbyterian that was willing and able to come and speak with us today regarding mental health support, and then also working with our employees at the nonprofits that we serve. And so Diane and I were actually talking a little bit earlier, like how, when you think of mental health, and some people may not directly relate it to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but everyone that we encounter on a daily basis, whether it be our employees, our colleagues, the individuals that we serve, they may be struggling with something that you are not aware of. And so it's about giving that grace, offering that support, and really striving to provide phenomenal services and outcomes. So with all of that said, I'm going to introduce Tara Keach. She is our speaker today, and she is with Tara Keach Coaching. And so we are thrilled to have you, and I will give you a co-host, or Leslie will give you co-host abilities if there's anything that you would like to share with the group. So we are thrilled to have you. The floor is yours.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled that you guys are doing the work that you're doing in the world. So thank you all for what you're doing to make this like the world we all want to live in. And I'm really excited to talk with you guys about mental health. I'm going to frame the conversation around a concept you may be familiar with, burnout. And especially when we think about being in partnership and community and co-working with others, there's this new term for burnout you may have heard called quiet quitting. So many of our teammates and maybe ourselves are faced with like feeling like we're having to choose between like showing up as our real selves, doing work that matters, feeling like we're not quite rested or restored. And so I want to share with you guys some of the concepts that I use in the coaching that I do. I work a lot with leaders, and I work a lot with super bright, high achieving leaders, which you guys are likely all, or you wouldn't have raised your hand and volunteered for a committee like this. So I'm going to share a presentation. I'm going to give you a link in a few minutes before and after we go through it, so you guys can download all the materials. You don't have to take frantic notes or anything, but if you want to, of course, please do. It's just, it will be here for you when you're ready. So give me a moment. Let me share my screen. I would love a quick affirmation that you guys can see the screen. Can you guys let me know when you can see it? It looks like it's still pasting there.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool. So again, my name is Tara Keach. I am a life coach with Tara Keach Coaching, and burnout is super fun to talk about for a couple of reasons. It is a shared experience that I think is part of just being human, especially when you're a leader, and especially when you work in our communities and with other humans who are probably also dealing with burnout. We're going to talk about some of the reasons why it's a really beautiful opportunity. And I hope that you walk away with an understanding that it is human, that we all get a measure of grace as we encounter these different things, and some tools that you can apply for yourself and for those that you're working with and serving. So there we are. Here's the website. You can take a quick screen grab, or maybe, let's see, can I grab? I don't think I can grab it and put it into chat really quick, but that's where it's at. SACNP, tarakeach.com/SACNP is where you'll get the deck. What we're going to talk about today is how burnout shows up. A lot of this is going to be pretty intuitive. You guys are going to kind of nod your heads. It's probably really familiar to you. And then we're going to get a little psychology nerdy with you guys about what's really going on, the biopsychosocial drivers that are propelling us into these experiences, and really where the opportunities are for us to pay attention. And then I want to talk to you guys about my favorite thing in the world, which is the coaching model I use. I call it thought curation. This is how you can really look at what's going on in your own life and help those that you're leading look at what's going on in their lives and get them aligned into taking intentional action. All right. So I'll also say this as we go through. If you guys have questions, you want to pop them in the chat. There will be time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to go ahead and ask questions as I'm going through. And I would just ask for help if there is something that you need me to pause and address. Please, someone just speak up and help me make sure that I'm paying attention in the right ways. Okay. So this is what burnout prevention in real life can look like. I've had the privilege of working with many clients, and Ashley had just gone through a very rigorous promotion cycle where she had to run the gauntlet. And she said that I can't imagine getting here without our work together. And the foundation of what she and I coached on is what you guys are going to get here too. So I hope you are able to receive it and take it forward into whatever situation you find yourself in. Okay, so I am Tara Keach. I am here in Mobile, Alabama. This has always been home base for us. We came back when I was starting high school and were taking care of my mom's mom who had dementia. And then my other grandmother, who was an alcoholic, moved into the house with us. So we had a really eventful, I had a really eventful high school and undergrad experience getting to be a caregiver and witness my parents as they caregived to both of those grandmothers. I wouldn't have traded it for the world, but it did kind of inspire me. And I thought that I wanted to become a therapist and work with dementia caregivers and their patients. So my husband moved to town, we met and got married so quickly, and then moved right away to Denver for my master's program. And it was there. I was 2 weeks into the program. We had quit our jobs, didn't have income. And I can still remember like the chair I was sitting in. It was one of those like 1970s, like the pleather chairs with the brads at the end of the arm. And I remember like touching the brads and looking out the window at the Rocky Mountains and thinking, this is not what I want to do with my life. I don't want to be here. This isn't what I want to study. What am I going to do? And for me, that was my very first experience with burnout, where things didn't quite feel right. I didn't really recognize who I was. I had shifted so many things and on purpose tried to get to where I was, but it didn't quite feel right when I got there. Long story short, I finished the master's and transitioned into academic medical research. And I worked with a lot of amazing nonprofits doing hospice and palliative care, end-of-life decision-making. At that point, I also felt like I was stuck. I knew that I didn't want a PhD and I wasn't quite sure what to do with my life. And it kind of felt like I had done all the things. I checked all the boxes and climbed the ladder, but it didn't quite feel right. And it didn't quite feel like me. And I was there again in this like state of burnout where I was just doing things to get through and I didn't recognize myself. And so I plugged in to some mentors. This is the chapter in my life when I discovered coaching and self-coaching and was able to learn and apply some of the same tools that we're going to talk through today. But those two chapters in my life were really pivotal. Out of that, when I climbed out of burnout, I wound up in corporate and was consulting, doing project management, similar to what I had done with the research work. But I got to be in the room with like super high achievers. These are high achievers that were making decisions that made headlines about how business and corporate capitalistic structures were making decisions and moving and shaking things. But these people who had all the money and all the degrees and every asset looking from the outside in were, when we shut the closed doors or had dinner, would share with me that they still felt like failures and that they were burnt out and they were carrying around baggage from when they were younger, things that their parents had said to them or the things that other people had done to them, right? The advantages that we might strive for and look from the outside in aren't the solution to avoiding burnout. You can have all the degrees, you can have all the things, and you're still super burnout. And so for me, that was my light bulb moment where I recognized that burnout is a state of chronic stress that leads to emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. And it's not caused by not having enough or not being enough or not doing enough, right? I want to go through these symptoms of burnout with you. I really want you to think about these as flags or indicators that you might be experiencing burnout, or things that you might be seeing in those that you're serving or supporting or leading. And I just want you to keep them in your hip pocket. As we go through this list, you guys may be like, yes, absolutely, Tara. Of course, this is what burnout is. Or yes, I know this well. I just want you to just keep a little mental track of how these things might show up. I also want to give you permission that burnout can show up in degrees. I think it's kind of a spectrum where you can have a little bit of burnout in one area, or you can be like fully, completely fried and over everything and want to burn it all down. That's okay. So first up, let's talk about emotional exhaustion. So if you're burnt out, these emotional exhaustion symptoms are likely poking up. There's typically a sense of anxiety. So like an anxious feeling, not like a pervasive panic attack, but like a steady undercurrent where you feel like you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, or maybe just like you can't shake the feeling. If it's hard for you to find enjoyment, especially in things that you've typically found enjoyment in, if you're pessimistic or cynical, even though that maybe hasn't always been part of your personality, if you find yourself easily irritated or frustrated, and sometimes that lack of satisfaction and wins can be a really key indicator. So it feels like you're never enough, or you've never done enough. Just keep moving the goalpost further out. Those are all indicators that you might be experiencing emotional exhaustion. Next up is mental exhaustion. So I love to use this example because so often we think of creative people like either you are creative or you're not. But for those of you that may not feel like you're crafty, you're still really creative in the way that you're able to connect with people and communicate or solve problems. So if that feels harder for you and your creativity in that way is sort of waning, that's an indicator, maybe a flag that you're dealing with mental exhaustion. If you're super critical of yourself or your coworkers or those that are closest to you, if you feel disconnected from your purpose, like it doesn't feel familiar, it doesn't feel right, or you don't really remember, or it doesn't quite bring you the same like motivation that it used to. Or if there's indicators that you're forgetful or not quite remembering things, not quite as sharp with your attention to detail, those are all indicators of mental exhaustion. And then physical exhaustion, and this is usually where I get the heads to nod. If you're feeling fatigued, if you're not able to like go to sleep, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't go back to sleep, if you're too tired to make and keep social plans, if you're the one that's always calling and flaking out just because it's not quite worth it at the end of the day, I see you, I have been you, no judgment. That's just a sign that it might be physical exhaustion. And then performance may be suffering. This is where you're not quite able to accomplish as much as you used to or want to. And if you feel like you're really just dragging yourself through the day, out of bed, into the car, at work, and through the end of the day. These are all physical exhaustion indicators, okay? So take these lists, pop them in your hip pocket, and just pay attention. Now, I want you to think about the root cause of burnout, because you're like, okay, yeah, Tara, I know what burnout is. The root cause of burnout is when you're doing things for reasons that you don't like. So that kind of makes sense, right? But when you think about it, the next question may be like, why would anybody do things for reasons that they don't like? Well, it happens all the time, literally all the time. I like to call it that evolution of ambition, right? Like if you have climbed the ladder, you have checked the boxes, you've gone through all the hoops, and you get there, and what you want has kind of shifted. Our society, our culture doesn't give a lot of grace for this to happen, right? Like we like to have a singular path, we like to have an A to B, but what if we get to B and it doesn't quite feel right? Well, I think this evolution of ambition is an essential part of how we're wired and who we're here to be, like how we're meant to be. But when you get there and what you've like worked so diligently for, put so much concerted effort and resources into isn't quite what you expected, and it doesn't feel right. And maybe you're at a place where you feel stuck or you don't know what you want next. What we do, what we with humans and human brains love to do is typically we just sort of like white knuckle it, right? Like we buckle down, We either blame ourselves or we blame others, or we do keep moving that goalpost. Like, clearly I must need another degree, or clearly I need another promotion, or clearly there's something more that I want and need and don't have or am not. So we start taking action out of that, like shame or guilt or fear, regret. And those reasons really, really suck. So we're doing things for these reasons and we just don't like the reasons anymore. And when we stay there, that's the state of chronic stress. And that is where burnout comes from. But that's really good news, because knowing that your ambition has evolved is a really great clue about what to do next. So, little quick quiz time to check in with yourself. You may not like your reasons if you feel like you're never enough. You feel like what you're doing is never quite enough. You're not quite hitting the mark. You won't ever be enough, if those are thoughts you've had. Or if you really are in survival mode to maintain the status quo, if you feel like you're just trying to get through the day, right? That stuckness can feel really isolating. It can feel really kind of lonely and a little hopeless. And that's burnout. If you don't recognize yourself anymore, right? So many times I'll meet with somebody for the first time and they'll say, like, I don't even know what I want. Like, it's been forever since I've even thought about what it is that matters to me, or who I am, or what it is that I want next. And if it feels like you're having to react to changes all the time, right? Like you're subjected to the external circumstances, you're probably not liking those reasons either. So if you don't like your reasons, you're going to burn out. And this is tough love, but there's nothing that you can do for your circumstance. It's going to change that. A vacation is amazing, and please take vacations, but a vacation's not going to fix burnout. Having a new partner, or making more money, or getting a new title, or getting a new car, or pounding Chardonnay alone at home at night is not going to fix the reasons why you're burnt out. But I have really good news too. And this is where we're going to get a little nerdy about your brain, because this is the best news. When you're burnt out, it means that your brain is doing a really great job. And it means that you're getting ready for what's next. So I want to share with you guys a little bit of the neurology that's happening when we have this experience of burnout. Burnout is a survival mechanism. Did you hear me? Like, you're supposed to get burnt out when things are out of alignment, when your ambitions evolved or you've outgrown goals that you've had in the past. Good job being burnt out, because it's just a signal for you to pay attention to. So let's talk. There's so many things about your brain that are amazing and that are helping you respond and survive. But I want to talk about 3 specific things about your brain. I do see the chat popping up. Is there a question? Let me look really quickly. Oh, good. Yeah. A new planner and pen won't fix it. You're right, Diane. Okay. So I want you guys, if you're willing to, like, put your hand right on top of your forehead, because this part behind your brain is your prefrontal cortex. Okay. This part of your brain is where you do your executive functioning. This is where you do your long-term, like, visioning and planning. This is where you make decisions. This prefrontal cortex is a powerhouse. I actually think of it like a queen who's sort of like sitting out in the front of my head, watching my life and seeing the whole chessboard. This prefrontal cortex is an amazing resource. It's part of what sets us apart as a species. Humans are the ones that have the prefrontal cortex and have the ability to do this really cool thought work. This part of your brain also requires a ton of energy. Like, it's literally consuming more energy than most of the other parts of your brain, because that thought requires intentional and deliberate effort. So when you're burnt out and your other survival mechanisms are like teed up, your energy is diverted away from the prefrontal cortex into the other areas of your brain that help you do that, like maintenance of the status quo and like just survival, right? You've prioritized in the state of stress. Your brain is automatically prioritizing these other functions, which is a beautiful thing. We need to survive. Our brains want us to survive. So it takes energy away from this prefrontal cortex to focus on survival, which means that you're not quite able to see the whole picture. You don't always see the whole landscape. Making decisions can feel harder. Some of that mental, emotional exhaustion are right there. So good job, brain. from keeping us in survival mode and keeping us alive. Next, let's talk about neural pathways. So if you guys want to take your fingers and like interlace them for me, and like all over your head is where these neural pathways are happening. And I know many of you know this, so I'm just going to be brief, but when you have a thought, you have one neuron that sends a faint electrical signal to another neuron. Now, when this happens, you have a thought. Also, that faint electrical signal is literally in the gray matter of your brain, like making a slight carve out of a pathway between those two neurons. Now, the more we think a thought, the more that electrical signal is passed, the deeper and the wider that pathway becomes. Now, the term for this is neural entrenchment. It's literally like digging a trench between the two neurons. Now, your beautiful brain is doing a great job always by helping you use as little energy as possible by taking the path that is deeper and wider. There's less resistance there. This is why it's harder to think new thoughts and so much easier to think the old familiar thoughts. So pathways also get deeper and wider when there's an emotion that's strong, that's attached to that thought. So if you had a really scary experience, that emotion dug that trench deeper and wider and now makes it easier to think that same scary thought. So when you're burnt out, and your brain is conserving that energy and trying to do its job as efficiently as possible to keep you alive, it's going to always look for those easier pathways. That's when we have the experience of having thoughts that are like automatic, right? Those are the thoughts that take less energy to think. They're more familiar, they're more practiced, they're taking that deepest and widest trench so that there's less resistance. So your brain, while it's burnt out, is taking these neural pathways. It's easier than shifting into new thoughts. That's why it can feel really hard to shake off the feeling of burnout, or like having a bad day can feel really hard sometimes, because that stress response, your brain is helping you save energy. Okay. Next up is your amygdala. This is the last like brain biology for today, but I'd love it if you wanted to take your hand and put it behind your head, sort of like where your skull dips in a little bit there. It's part of your limbic system. Your amygdala is an amazing alarm system. It is what is constantly surveying for threats. I don't know if I have a friend, and she, every time we would walk anywhere at night, she's like looking around corners and like checking out shadows. Like her amygdala is on high alert when we're walking, and it's a great asset, right? Like, thank God for amygdalas, they keep us safe. It's where fight, flight, freeze, and fawn come from. And your amygdala, in a state of stress, if you're feeling that exhaustion, that physical, mental, emotional exhaustion, your amygdala is ready to go. Like your amygdala is looking for a reason to hit the alarm button and freak you out, to keep you alive, because it recognizes that you're stressed and it deduces that there must be a threat. So it's looking for proof of the threat. It's a beautiful thing. We need these survival mechanisms. And when we hit burnout, I want you to recognize that your brain is doing a really fantastic job. So all of these mechanisms and many others are working together to help us stand on this, what I learned is the tripod of survival. If you can do these three things as a human with a human brain, if you can do these three things, your chances of survival are almost guaranteed. If you seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. So when I say seek pleasure, if your brain can help you find sources of sustenance, that calorie-dense food, that comfort of the couch, even like if you're thinking about a primal existence, like having intercourse helps our gene pool like stay sustained. All of those pleasure sources indicate safety. So our brain is seeking pleasure to help us stay alive. It's also really wanting to avoid pain, because pain represents like a threat to our safety, to our survival. Like we don't want to like go fight, I don't know, tigers. We don't want to like climb through the bramble bushes that have the thorns and the splinters. We want to avoid the pain. And in 2022, sometimes avoiding pain is like not showing up to work, not speaking up in a meeting, not risking that humiliation or embarrassment, or not risking rejection, right? Now, conserving energy, this is another one that's just a beautiful survival mechanism. The less we have to exert ourselves, the more secure our source of nutrient, our resources are, excuse me. So like our energy isn't used on frivolous things. We don't want to go out and keep those plans that we made. We don't really want to get off the couch. We kind of want to not raise our hand in the meeting. We don't want to volunteer to do more. We don't want to do X, Y, and Z because that impulse to conserve our energy is so strong to help keep us alive. Now, all of these are those automatic patterns. If we do all of these, it's going to keep us alive, but it's also going to keep us exactly where we are. Now, that's like a double-edged sword because you're burnt out and you're not feeling good. So these survival cues are so heightened, but it's just going to keep you exactly where you are. So let's talk about that next. Okay. Burnout is your cue that you're ready to change on purpose for a purpose. It's letting you know that your ambition has evolved and that this moment of burnout is showing you that there is an opportunity for you to align intentionally to what matters to you for reasons that you love, to create a life that feels more in alignment, that's going to feel more rewarding, like what you want to live. So all that's great. This is more coaching tough love, okay? The only way to change how you feel is to change the way that you think. Okay, this is typically where people feel resistance to me, and I just want you to know that if you're feeling resistance, that's okay, and I welcome it. Hang tight with me, let's keep having the conversation. So my objective here in this next set of slides and in this next set of conversations we're about to have is just to make sure that you know that burnout is a real and human issue. It does not mean you've done anything wrong. You have a beautiful human brain that is responding and helping you survive some really challenging circumstances. Okay, this is a human thing. This isn't a you thing. This is just your opportunity. I also want to give you permission that knowing this and taking action and doing this are two very different things. I have clients who are therapists and counselors, and they know what we're about to go through. They know the models, they know the neurology and physiology, but taking action so that they can live this is a very different intention. So you have permission that sometimes this is hard to do. I also want to give you this, that discomfort. The discomfort that comes with intentionally doing things that are different from your automatic thoughts and your automatic survival responses. That discomfort is how you create whatever success it is that you want in your life. But it isn't going to be automatically comfortable. It's going to require that risk to step outside of that survival programming, right? Okay. Also, you're capable. I believe that burnout shows up because we're capable and because we're ready. So if you could choose to believe that with me, burnout shows up when you're capable of making a shift. So this is my favorite thing to talk about in the whole world. We're going to go through this thought curation model. This is how you change the way that you're thinking. And it's also how you get to leverage all of those negative spectrum emotions, right? Like burnout, anxiety, sadness, humiliation, hurt, in order to create the results that you really want for any goal that you have. And I say any goal, I mean any goal. I have clients that are working on all the different goals in all the different domains of life, like for their physical self, their financial self, their career, their family, their intimacy, relationships, their work roles. Okay. Whatever negative emotions you have can be applied to help you create what it is that you want. So let's dive in. Okay. We're going to talk about some of the basics that are underpinning every experience you have. So first up, in any experience, we've got the data. I like to think of the data like the neutral situation. This is just the facts, like just the facts, man. These are things that could be provable in court, and you don't have any control over what the data is. So it is 85 degrees outside. So-and-so said these words. If there had been a video camera, we could have captured that. This is the set of to-dos that I have. This is the traffic conditions, right? The data is the neutral, provable facts. And this can be a little tricky to wrap your mind around, but let's imagine the most recent disagreement you've had with someone. If you both can't agree on the data, that means it's not the data. So data has to be that neutral that even if you're disagreeing with someone else, the data could be agreed to. Now, when your brain goes through life and you encounter different data points, your brain is triggered to have a thought in response to that data point. Now, thoughts are where it gets juicy. For the purposes of what we're going to talk about here, I want you to recognize that I'm not talking about subconscious thoughts. I am talking about the thoughts that are approaching consciousness, so at that liminal level, or the actual conscious thoughts that run through like a teleprompter in your mind. Okay, typically I like to boil these thoughts down to like one sentence or phrase. And stick with me, those thoughts are optional in that you can choose to endorse them, you can choose to question them, you can choose to shift into other optional thoughts at that moment. Okay, so you have a data point. Your beautiful brain goes through its entire encyclopedia of entries that you've had your entire life. So you have a data point. Somebody says, I don't know what football team you guys are into, but like somebody says, go team. And your brain goes to the library of experience you have and says, yes, I support that team. Go team is the thought that you have in response to it. Your brain has indexed and stored the lessons that it's learned. All those neural entrenchments that you have across the experience of your life have been entered in as optional thoughts that you can choose to reference in response to all these data points. So you're asked to do something that feels really scary. Your brain goes back and like, oh, in third grade, you have to give a speech. You don't want to get up and give that speech. We're not going to give a speech, right? So your brain is pulling that optional thought in response to the data point. Now, once that thought enters your conscious or becomes like the subtext of your consciousness, then your beautiful body has a neurological, physiological response to that thought that we experience as an emotion. So those feelings that we have in response to a thought are typically like a 1 or 2 word description. And we feel it, I like to think of it like a vibration in your body. So bear with me. I'd like you guys to think of the last time that you felt a little nervous. And to pull that feeling up in your body. And you're welcome to pop it in the chat, but like I want you to name where in your body you feel nervousness. And everybody's body is different. There's not like a truth about how emotions show up, but you and your body have a certain sort of like a fingerprint for how you feel a feeling. Okay, now take a deep breath. I'd like you to pull up the feeling of happiness. And I want you to recognize where in your body, like what is that sensation? Is it soft, hot, cold, warm, radiant, like pulsing? Like where and how do you feel that? That is how you feel that vibration in your body. Great job. I see the chat popping up. Good, worked. Yes. Stomach and chest. Yes. Good, 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 good. You guys are paying such good attention. Well done. Shoulders and neck, I feel you. Okay. I also want to show you guys that you were able to create that physiological emotion because you went to your thoughts and pulled down an experience that you referenced. Okay, so your thought created the physiological feeling of a feeling. Now, when we have feelings in response to thoughts, it can be positive spectrum or negative spectrum emotions. And there's a whole lot of emotions that are kind of in the middle there. So once we have a conscious thought or liminal thought, we have an emotional response to it. Even if it's like a neutral data point. You're like, yeah, it's 85 degrees out. Okay. Like that feeling, like, okay, is also a feeling. So that's what we're thinking about. That's how we define feeling for the purpose of this model. Once we have a feeling, you take a behavior. This is any action, reaction, or inaction that we have in response, in direct response to that feeling. I want you to think about that for a second. We only ever take action because of how we feel or how we want to avoid feeling. Are you with me? We only ever do something because of how we want to feel. We only ever do something because of how we want to not feel. And when we do take a behavior or take an action, we create an outcome, right? This is like math, like you take a step forward is your action. The outcome is that you are now a step forward. You changed your positioning. Even inaction creates these outcomes. Now, this is the part that feels like magic, because every single outcome you have in your life, every single result proves a thought that you have. So tough love, Tara, again, if there's a result that you want that you don't have, it's due to some thoughts that are going on. If there's a result that you don't want that you do have, there's also some thoughts that are creating that outcome. So when we do this thought model, and we're going to go through a couple examples here in a minute, I want you to pay close attention because the outcomes will always prove the thoughts. A couple other notes. You only ever get to know and influence your own thought model. Now, we have people that we trust in our lives and we love and feel connected to. You still don't ever know their thoughts. You can't control their feelings, and you cannot control their behavior. And if any of you have been around children or have your own children, you know this to be true. You cannot control their thoughts, their feelings, or their behaviors. It's only ever your thought model that we're talking about here. Now, we can strive to influence, strive to create different outcomes that become those people's data points. And other people's outcomes also become your data points. So-and-so said these words. My student made a bad decision and now has to go to like tutoring. Like all of those are data points that you now get to have thoughts in response to, but that's their model that helped influence your data that you get to control your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in response to. Okay, let's look at some examples. So this is a real life client example. She's a consultant in one of the Fortunes. She received negative performance feedback at work. She was told in written and verbal words that her performance wasn't satisfactory and that they wanted some changes made. Now, that is neutral data. Okay, if you had an emotional response to that, it's because you hadn't thought about it. So I'm going to share with you her thought model. This is the thought model we started coaching from. So the first set of thoughts she had a lot of thoughts, and we do. Our beautiful human brains have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. They happen in rapid sequence, often what seems like on top of each other. So this is a couple of sets of her thoughts. She had automatic thoughts about the people who gave her feedback, them. She said they're being unfair. I'm being set up to fail. How dare they? They don't know what they're talking about. Right? She had thoughts about herself. I'm not good at this. It's never enough. I don't know what I'm doing. This isn't working and I'm gonna fail. Now I want you to think, how do you think she was feeling if those thoughts were true for her? Angry, resentful, disappointed, embarrassed, hurt, and alone, defensive, offensive, all those things. And when you're feeling angry and resentful and hurt and isolated, what sort of behaviors do you typically take? Like if that's your fuel, if that feeling is your fuel, what is the natural course of behavior that you're going to take in response to that? Well, for her behaviors were that she stewed a little bit. She complained. She blew up at a couple different people. She withdrew and shut down. So this is some of the quiet quitting, right, guys? There was inaction. And she also complained and vented to some colleagues. Now, if those are your behaviors, you take that action, what's going to be the result? Well, for her, her conflicts escalated, right? Because she was blowing up and complaining. She wasn't making changes from this emotional state. And her relationships and her reputation were being put at risk. Real life situation. I want you to look at this outcome. The conflict escalated. Proves the thought they're not fair. I'm being set up to fail. It's never enough. She wasn't making changes. And it proved that the relationships weren't solid. There wasn't trust there. Do you guys see how the outcome proves the thoughts that she had? Okay. Now, we did some coaching. And coaching work is really like, let's look at the thoughts. Let's be curious about the thoughts that are happening. And let's be kind to ourselves. So when we looked at her data, we looked at her thoughts, we were able to get to some more neutral but believable thoughts. My goal here is not to have you guys whitewash or like put happy sunshiny stickers all over some really hard things. But if you can get your brain out of survival mode in slightly more neutral space, then you can re-engage your prefrontal cortex and take more rational, intentional action to create the result that you want. Or if you find out that a boundary has been crossed and you're not willing to tolerate whatever it is again, you can take a plan of action that's going to help you intentionally honor your own boundaries. Or if there's a goal that you want and you feel really good about it, but it's just really hard to get to, being curious about your thoughts and being kind to yourself can help you recognize what is not working, capitalize on what is working, and make a plan from there. So for this client, these are the neutral, believable thoughts that came from her brain that she was able to intentionally choose, intentionally curate these thoughts. So she said, I'm capable of making changes. She got to a couple really powerful questions, and sometimes questions can be transformative for our thoughts and our emotions. So she asked this question of herself. She said, how can I best meet my company's, my team's, and my clients' needs? She had the thought, I want to succeed here. She acknowledged that that was her intention. And the question, the statement, I can help improve their pain points. She was able to sort of like look at the ink on the paper and see that the feedback she got was indicating pain points that they wanted fixed. And her thought was, I can help improve these pain points. And I can understand. Not that she has to understand, but I can. I'm capable of it. Do you guys feel the emotional shift between the automatic thought model and this thought model? For her, these brought up feelings of being challenged, like in a good way. She felt capable and she felt ready. From that emotional shift, the intentional behaviors she chose were to create solutions. She sought out mentorship and took their advice. And from those behaviors, the outcome is that changes were made and performance got improved, which proves the thoughts, right? Because outcomes prove our thoughts, that she's capable of making changes and she does want to succeed there. Do you guys see the outcomes are proving the thoughts? Okay, so here's what we've covered so far. We talked about how burnout's showing up. We talked about the symptoms that you may be recognizing, and we looked at what's going on in your biology, your physiology, your psychology that's helping to create that burnout experience. It's actually trying to serve you. And then we reviewed the thought curation model. So I want to give you guys a couple of exercises. This exists on that link in a downloadable form that's like printer friendly. You're going to get that link again in a second. Okay. So here we go. tarakeach.com/SACNP. We're going to go through them on the slide and then you can pull down the form and follow along. These are the steps. If there's something in your life that you want, I want you to get specific with it. I want you to define what it is that you want and what values you have that are motivating you. Let's get as clear and specific about that outcome as possible. And once you've got that, why you want it and all of those good, juicy reasons that are motivating you go into your thoughts line. Okay. Because we have an outcome. If that's going to be true, what thoughts will you have to have that are necessary to prove that intentional outcome? And I love this question, and this may be different from how you're used to thinking about things, but I want you to imagine the goal that you've got. How do you want to feel as you're experiencing that or as you're creating it? What emotional fuel, if you could choose from like the sample tray of all the feelings in the world, like which feelings would you choose that could help fuel you? Now, clarified what you want. Part 2 is deciding to get it. So often we like to think of what we want in the abstract. It's making the decision to commit to getting it that we sometimes like fall off or let ourselves get comfortable and avoid making that commitment. So I want you to confirm, if you haven't decided to get something, do you like your reasons for wanting it in the first place? Because if there's resistance and we're being curious and kind, maybe that resistance is telling you that you don't really like your reasons. Maybe you're trying to like pacify some shame or some guilt that you've been carrying around. Or maybe you're trying to do it to please other people to prove that you're valuable. Our brains do all sorts of amazing gymnastics when it comes to getting what we want. I want you to be honest with yourself as you're thinking through these answers. Okay, so the next thing I want you to answer, and this is probably what you've been chomping at the bit to do, is to figure out how to get it done. You guys are problem solvers. You raised your hands to be on like extra committees and help move the diversity, equity, inclusion needle forward. You guys are focused on solving things, and you probably have a million strategies in your toolbox. It's really the last piece of the puzzle to think about how you want to take action to create the outcome that you want. Because once you've got clarity about what you want, why you want it, how you want to feel, and you've confirmed that you really do want it for reasons that you like, then answering how becomes so much simpler. Next, if you're having a hard time deciding, I want to give you permission that that's okay. It's really healthy sometimes to give yourself some time to make a committed decision. I actually avoid commitment. I take a long time to make a decision, and this is a tool that I use and I love, is give myself a decide by date. I actually just did this last week and it worked really well. It gave me a committed date that I knew I would make a decision. I had to put a time. I couldn't just have it be a date. I had to actually pick a time because that's how much I was avoiding this particular decision. But if you give yourself a decide by date, it relieves that cognitive load of having to like wonder and feel pressure that doesn't really exist. So you can pick a decide by date. I encourage you to be accountable with somebody for it. But at that date, then you get to decide what it is that you really want. And then going and doing it. Once you've made that commitment and you've made the decision that you do want it, please be kind and curious to yourself. I want you to observe and allow yourself to have resistance to it. If it's that discomfort that's going to create the intentional outcome that you want, then maybe that's the healthy kind of resistance. Or if it's resistance that feels like guilt and shame and pressure and obligation, maybe not. All right. Remember, that discomfort, that intentional discomfort to create those intentional outcomes is the currency. That's how you get whatever it is that you really want. Okay, so you've got these exercises and printable worksheets at that link. You can screenshot it here if you want to. I've got one more page of these. This is where I want you to think about a past circumstance. So sort of using the thought model to understand what's happened in the past. It's like great training wheels for practicing how the thought model works. And remember, the outcome proves the thought. So if the outcome doesn't prove the thoughts, keep digging for the thought that does. Maybe there's something else going on that can be really rich and rewarding work. And then thinking about your future is the exercise that we just went through. So pick a goal, pick a feeling you want to feel, pick some behaviors you know you want to take. You can start at any point in this model and go from there. Okay. If you want to connect with me, I would love to. This offer stands. Guys, if you have questions about what we've covered that you don't necessarily want to raise your hand for in this public forum, you're welcome to reach out to me. And again, you can get the slides at tarakeach.com/SACNP. And I'm going to open it up for Q&A. And I see some chats, so let me catch up. And you guys are welcome to come off mute and talk to me too. Any questions? Oh, thanks. Leslie,
I'll
thank you.
ask one. So people have depression, like diagnosed depression, take medication. Are those sort of all intertwined, or is there some way to distinguish between this is burnout and this is sort of how my brain works?
I love that question, and thank you for asking it. I should have spoken to that. The distinction between depression and burnout is functioning. So depression can inhibit your ability to function and get through the day and do the things that you normally need to do. Burnout is really some of those symptoms that are tied to your thoughts more than an actual clinical diagnosis. And I do have great therapists in my network. If anybody needs to know a therapist, I imagine you guys have those too with the worlds that you operate in. Other questions?
Tara, this is Jill Chenoweth. It's not a question, but this is obviously much needed by my staff and me. So thank you so much and appreciate your doing this. And thank you on behalf of this South Alabama Coalition of Nonprofits and the United Way of Southwest Alabama. This was absolutely fabulous and recognized a lot of this in me and a lot of the folks that are on this screen. So, and also a shout out to Alabama Power Foundation because they are sponsoring this series for us. So thank you to everyone and appreciate everyone in attendance. Appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to be in this very informative class. So thank you.
It's my joy, Jill. Thank you.
Hey, Tara. Everyone, I'm Amy at Big Brothers Big Sisters. And someone had turned me on to Tara in the January of 2020. And we partnered with her for our entire staff team for coaching and leading into literally like March. I think we had our retreat like the first week of March of 2020, which, you know, in hindsight was just really a blessing. And so it's great to see you. I strongly encourage you all to consider that one-on-one time with her. Our staff team, we still talk about it today, and there's been follow-up with, you know, individual people have taken advantage of more coaching and time. I should take advantage of more coaching. But it's great to see you did a wonderful job, and it's been great. This is something that you constantly, it's not one time, you need these refreshers and reminders. I realize, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Oh, I stopped doing that. I was doing that. So thank you very much. There's no silver bullet. It takes ongoing work for sure.
Thanks, Amy. I'm glad to see your face.
Yeah, you too.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Harris James. I'm not on video, but I have been listening the whole time. And the only thing I can think about is, wow, she must create superstars. You unlocked so much for me. Thank you so much. I love how you say your beautiful brain. And it just really, for me, when you were connecting the dots, it explained why I move the way I move. So at times, if I was doubting myself, you just connected it for me so much. So thank you. Thank you, United Way. Thank you, SACNP. I got so much out of this.
My joy, Tiffany. All right, guys. Well, offer stands. If you guys have questions or would like a private forum for follow-ups, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'd love to be of service. Let me know how to help. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Diane, for the opportunity. This has been really fun.
Yes, thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Tara.
Everyone for coming and being with us on this session. This was a really fruitful conversation, and this is a fabulous way to end this work week. So, all right. Well, we are finished. So